Hello everyone, welcome to another video, and today we'll be talking about the Sony a7 IV again, reporting back on the Sony a7 IV after having updated the firmware to the latest one for about a month now. So if you didn't know already, Sony released a firmware update on March 30th. And today, at the time of the filming of this video, we're in the beginning of May, so it's been about a month. I created a video on how to update the firmware on the Sony a7 IV. So if you haven't done that or you do not know how to do that, you can check that video out here. But today is just me reporting back to let you guys know what I've experienced with the Sony a7 IV. But just to refresh your memory, let's look at that clip from 3 weeks ago first. I've been playing with the menus on the Sony a7 IV now for about 25 to 30 minutes. And I still don't see a overheating warning come up, but the camera does feel a little warmer. But that just could be because I just finished doing the firmware update not too long ago. I'll be leaving this temperature setting to standard, and I'll let you know in a future video how this works out for me. So this is me in the present now, reporting back after about 3 weeks. So to refresh your memory a little bit with this new firmware update from Sony, Sony addresses a few things. The first one is that it improves the accuracy of eye autofocus. And it has been a complaint for a lot of people, especially who shoot portrait photos. I haven't seen it myself, but apparently it's an issue out there. But let me know if you experienced that issue with your a7 IV. I would love to hear about it in the comments below. The second one is that it fixes an issue where you may not be able to take photos when using a 28-60 lens. Again, I didn't experience that because I don't have that lens. And the third thing that this firmware update is supposed to do is to improve the operational stability of the camera. And I was hoping that with this new firmware update, Sony would be addressing some issues regarding to overheating that a lot of Sony a7 IV users have experienced. So when I first got my Sony a7 IV back in December of 2021, the overheating warning appeared on my camera even after about 15 to 20 minutes of just setting up my menus. And after playing with the camera for a little bit longer, the camera got really warm and then it shut down by itself. But there were a few workarounds that made your camera usable. The first one was to switch the temperature threshold of the camera from standard to high. And after I did that, I never experienced getting that overheating warning symbol again, nor did my camera shut down. Even after using it for extensive shoots, and I'm talking about 3 to 4 hour shoots, or perhaps a little bit longer. The other thing that helped with that was to have the screen flipped out. That helped with the heat dissipation, and that combined with the high temperature setting just helped my a7 IV run as if it was normal. So as soon as I got this new firmware update, I switched the camera back to standard in the auto power temp settings, and I was hoping that it would give me a similar result. Although Sony does not explicitly say here anything about overheating, I was hoping that improves the operational stability of the camera meant fixing some of those overheating issues, but apparently that's not the case. So my experience with the a7 IV has been that after I switched the camera to the standard setting, I took this camera to a shoot. It was an interview. I was setting up the lights, the microphone, and the camera was just on standby. The a7 IV was just on, and it was probably on for about 20 minutes, idling, not doing anything as I was moving around setting up different things. As soon as the interview started, about 5 minutes into it, I get an overheating warning. And at that point, I'm just freaking out because the interview had already started, and I know from experience that this means that the camera is going to shut off really soon. But thankfully, there was a gap in our interview, and I was able to tell the person who was conducting the interview as well as the person being interviewed to pause for a second while I adjusted some settings on the camera. I did not tell them obviously that my camera was overheating, but I just said that I had to adjust some settings on my camera before we continue. And I switched those temperature settings to high, and I continued the interview, and that overheating warning never came back again. And I tried this a couple of times at home, setting the camera back to standard, and I kept getting this overheating warning symbol. My conclusion is that Sony did not address overheating with this firmware update, unfortunately, at least for my a7 IV. The one thing that I did notice though, compared to when I first got the camera and I first unboxed it back in December of 2021, was that the amount of time it takes the camera to give me that overheating warning in standard mode, it's a little bit longer. So instead of it being 20 minutes just playing on the menu, now it's about 30-45 minutes. But that doesn't really help much if you want to use this camera for a job or a proper gig. My advice would be, if you have updated your firmware to the newest one, which is 1.01, to still update to this firmware because it's going to be beneficial, especially if you've encountered eye autofocus issues, but also keep the temperature setting to high and do not switch it back to standard. And as much as possible, try to shoot with the flip out screen out. Another thing to note is that I took this camera on a photo shoot and I had the camera on the standard setting, and I would turn off my camera whenever I wasn't shooting, and then whenever I saw a shot, then I would turn it back on and shoot. So in that case, in that scenario, because I wasn't leaving the camera on for a longer period of time, I did not get that overheating warning because I was turning the camera on and off as I was shooting. So if you're doing mainly just photography and you're not in a fast-paced scenario where your camera needs to be on all the time, maybe you're doing street photography or you are at an event that has a lot of breaks and pauses in between, if you want to shoot in standard mode, you could probably just turn the camera on and off. So that's my update on the Sony a7iv, my experience, just reporting back to you. And then let me know as well, what have been your experiences with overheating after having updated the firmware to version 1.01. I'm wondering if a lot of people are experiencing the same issues that I am, or if it's just me or just a few a7iVs out there. So yeah, let me know in the comments. For the time being, I'm just going to keep my camera temperature setting to high and just keep using it as I was using it before I did this firmware update. And just hoping that Sony comes up with another firmware addressing this issue because it can get quite annoying. And here in Toronto, we haven't entered summer yet, so I haven't had a chance to use this camera on a hot day, so I'm a little nervous about that. So hopefully Sony comes back soon with a firmware update addressing overheating. So that being said though, I'll be going to Maui in the next couple of weeks and I'll be bringing the a7iv. It'll be my main camera and that'll be the perfect test to see if this overheats in hot weather. So stay tuned for that. And as usual, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you haven't already, if you're subscribed, it's great to see you back here again, and I'll see you next time.